In a previous lesson, I mentioned we'd talk about custom brushes, so I'd like to create one now. What I've done so far is I've taken the petals of my flower and I've made a copy of them, and then I've placed a solid color inside because you can't use a gradient color to create a brush. With the flower selected, I'm going to make this a smaller size, and I'm going to create what's known as a scatter brush. So I'm going to click on the brushes panel. In the upper right corner where the hamburger icon is, I'm going to choose New Brush. This will give me the New Brush dialog box, and I can choose from these different types of brushes: art brushes, bristle brushes, pattern brushes. I'm going to choose the scatter brush and click OK. In the scatter brush, I'm going to give it a name. I'll call it Flower, or Flowers, since there's going to be many. And then you can see that there's several options that I can tweak. For example, I can change the size, the spacing, the scatter, and the rotation. Since I chose a scatter brush, it's going to create, along the path that I draw, a whole bunch of these little flower shapes, and they're going to go above and below the line, or left and right of the line that I draw. I can choose, instead of fixed, random. Random will allow the system to randomly generate the size that it wants. Spacing, randomly generate the spacing between each of the flowers that it's going to draw. Scatter, scatter will determine the random scattering above or below the line, or left or right of the line. And then rotate, again, random and rotate. Now the rotation here doesn't really matter. Well, in some cases it doesn't matter because it's a flower shape. It's already a circle. But if this was squarish or some kind of a oblong shape, it would start to show up. So just for now, I'm going to change this with these settings, randomized settings. And down here at the bottom is this colorization method. So when somebody chooses to colorize this, how is this going to work? I'm going to choose tints and shades. And what this means is when somebody goes in to change the color, it will change the color of this particular flower. I'm going to click OK. And now if I grab my line tool or my pen tool or whatever tool I want to use, like my paintbrush here, and as long as I have this selected and I click and drag, it will create a line with those particular items. Now you see here the color black. If I grab my selection tool and I change the stroke color to something else, maybe I change it to a green here, it does turn this green color, and it's adding to that the tints and shades. Make it a little lighter. So up here at the top, I'll choose a lighter green. And you can see it's changing the color. So this is the scatter. Now I don't think it's scattering enough for me. It's not going left and right of that line enough. So I'm going to make some changes to that settings. I'm going to delete these lines and whatever happened in this space. And I'm going to double click that brush tool, and I can literally change the settings that I want. So the rotation is 0 degrees, that's fine. But the random scatter here, I'm going to increase the value. Maybe make it, let's do like a 50% or something. And this is going to go top and bottom. And I can go negative or positive here. I'll go positive again, 50. When I click OK, now when I draw a line, you're going to start to see it's not as scattered as I'd like it to be still. So I'm going to increase the values on that. 50% was not enough. Double click. So I'm going to increase the values. And let's see what that does. Again, because of random scattering, it is changing the spacing a little bit. You can see that's happening. Let me go to undo, double click. I'll set this to fixed with the values that I've got. And now you can see it's fixed. Only one value is available. Now I choose the scattering. And it is kind of scattering along. All right, let's try some other settings. The spacing, I can increase or decrease the spacing between the elements. Right now it's doing 100% spacing there. Change that to maybe a 50% spacing there. So as I drag, the spacing is much closer together. I went less than 100%, so it's getting much more spacing closer together. I want it further apart, so we're going to make this a positive value above 100%. I'm just trying out different settings, and there we go. We're getting less of those flowers, and they're scattering along that line. And then the size. The size value is currently set to random, but I'll do fixed. And we'll set it so it can change the size. Let's say make it smaller than what it is. Click OK. Now as I drag, you see it's much smaller than it used to be, no longer 100% of the size that it was. So working with brushes, you can create your own custom brushes by creating your own shapes and then applying them as a brush. In this case, this was a scatter brush. Now, if I had created a different kind of brush, like artistic or whatever, it would have tried to apply that entire flower along the entire path. So I would have gotten an elongated flower on the path. So depending on the type of brush that you choose, you're going to get a different kind of an effect. So that's the brushes panel and working with custom brushes.